everybody, welcome back to the channel, and if you're here for the very first time, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I'm Jane, my husband Mike is behind the camera. We're British, Shirley retirees, we've got no debt, we've paid off the mortgage, and we live a thrifty, frugal and money-saving life here in Brittany in northwest France. And every Wednesday we invite you in for a mid-week money chat. And this Wednesday we're going to have a really important chat of why it is so important right now for us to build a really good pantry and have some very good food security in our home. We really hope that you love the video today. We ask you one thing is to go on, hit that like button, and at any point in this video if something resonates with you, go on, make sure that you leave a comment as well. To talk a little bit to begin with about economics, and I know lots of you do not like to watch the news, and I don't like to watch the news, but I force myself to take note of the economy and economics, not just here in France, not just across Europe, but globally, and look at those patterns and things of how we should be flexing and preparing for that, because as thrifty, frugal and money-saving people, we budget. And part of that means we are prepared for the budget that's coming. We don't wait for it to happen and run around like headless chickens. So let's have a look at this. In this year, we've already had a 9.8% increase in electricity costs. We've seen other energy costs rise as well. People have had their wholesale gas prices increase as well. That has had a massive knock-on effect on food. So we've got a inflation rate here running at about 2.2%, but we all know that that is absolute baloney for an average working class person. When I looked at actually food inflation prices, it's still running at 15%. So we still have really high food prices here and across Europe in general. And I know those of you watching in Australia, America, and especially in Canada, you are seeing really high prices in food as well. But are we ready for those to keep continuing to rise? And that's why we're going to talk about having a really good pantry and how we build that and how we flex with that. So, that headline figure of 2.2% inflation. So if there's 2.2% inflation, why did my energy bill go up by 10%? If there's 2-point-something% inflation, why are all your ongoing, everyday, working class, ordinary people's everyday expenses continuing to rise? So we have to be realistic about this. So we have to build some safety net for all of us. We have to be prepared for this. And you have to first of all decide how prepared you want to be. Now I'm going to share with you, honestly, we're a transparent channel, how prepared we are. We like to have at least minimum 1 month's food in the house. I shop every 2 weeks. So I've always got up to 2 weeks of fresh food in the house. I've always got up to 4 weeks of frozen food in the house. But that's the first thing I want you to do and evaluate as a family. I want you to go away and think, how much food do I need to have in the house? Do you live somewhere where it snows? Do you live somewhere where you can get cut off? Do you live somewhere where you can get power outages? Do you live somewhere where the economy is such that you could be subject to a drastic drop in the local economy? Do you live somewhere where things could be a shortage to you locally? I've often said this on the channel, if I lived in the Pyrenees, or I lived in the Alps, or I lived somewhere where there was really extreme weather conditions, or I lived somewhere where it was massively touristy, or there were lots of strikes, or there could be social unrest, how much I have in the house would be really, really different. So I'm asking you now to look at yourselves in your situation and say, how much is the right amount that we as a family would be comfortable with? The next really important thing for you to do when you have decided how much food you would be comfortable with, I want you to do a rough evaluation of how much that's going to cost you to sustain that, because you're going to need a roundabout figure, and that's all you can come up with, I'm afraid, a roundabout figure of how much you need to build up, maybe to build up that supply. And I have seen people do things, and I really wouldn't do them myself. I have seen people go out and use a credit card to build up a supply, or they've gone into their bank overdraft to build up a supply, or they've borrowed money to build up a supply. Please make note of this. I am not, and never would suggest anyone ever does that. However, would I take savings to build up a stock and supply? Yes, I would. And then I would take my time, if I had the means to do so, to replenish that savings, to build that back up. And I'm now going to go into why I would be happy to use savings to do that. So you might be asking myself, why would somebody like me, who's normally full of positivity, be concerned enough to use savings to build up food supplies? You might be saying to yourself, Jane, why don't you just keep the savings where they are and then just spend the savings when you need them to buy the food? And here are my reasons why I would do that if I needed to build a food supply. Here's an example. In the UK, you're just about to have the 10% price increase in energy that we here had in France back in May. It means that's going to have a knock-on effect. That's going to have a knock-on effect of every supermarket, every shop, every factory, everywhere that packs food, everywhere that puts a lettuce in a bag, everywhere has to have some electricity, and their electricity bill is also going to rise by 10%. And don't forget, domestic energy prices and those charged to businesses are not the same. Often businesses are charged more. So whenever there are those big increases coming, it is always a time, if you can, to brace yourself and be prepared for that. So often there is a time of the year when you don't have a massive expense, like Christmas, for example, and now we've just maybe sent the children back to school, bought all their new school clothes. But when it comes to that August pay packet, if you have anything spare from that, I would be buying more now, especially if I lived in the UK. I would be topping up some more. I might add 10% to my budget. If my supermarket budget was £60 a week, I'd definitely be spending 66. I might be adding 20% to that, making it 72, and using that extra 20% to add to my supplies. And it is being prepared for those oncoming costs, and we know they are coming. That is a brilliant reason to make sure that we are stocked up. Let's talk more about what we should or shouldn't stock up on. Now I want to share with you that I've made some mistakes in the past, a long time in the past admittedly, when it came to keeping a really good stock of food, and not just food, other non-food items in our house, because I could be in the supermarket and there would be these fantastic deals and offers, and I would be so tempted to stock up on them. But now, periodically, there is something I want to share with you that I do here that is really important. And it's, I evaluate the pantry cupboards, I evaluate the freezer, I evaluate everything around the house. And I take a really good look at what have we used a lot of that we always use? And what have I bought a lot of that we really haven't used, or we've been absolutely fed up? And I have to tell you the couscous story. At one stage, the family, the children, when they were home, were eating a lot of couscous. They really liked it. And then they absolutely went off it. And anyone with children, you might relate to this. All of a sudden, you've bought all of those boxes of porridge oats, because at one stage they were loving it. All of these boxes of couscous. And then all of a sudden, they just won't eat it. No matter what you do to disguise it or hide it or what you do with it. And it's those kind of experiences that get you to flex and change and adapt with your pantry planning. So here's what I did. I went and had a look at my cupboards. We're just not eating any tinned fruits. We really are not that keen on tinned beans. We are not people who like to eat meat on the bone or buy a whole unfilleted fish, for example. We're not people who like to buy a whole chicken on the bone. So I don't care how cheap it isn't something that we like. We like to eat seasonally. We like to eat salads in summer, winter food in winter. It is what we like. I'm looking at my notes here. We're not great pasta eaters. We're not great starch eaters. So I've already looked in my cupboards. I have got enough of some things to last me for months. But that's what I want you to do. I want you to evaluate before you buy anything, before you go out there and spend any money. I want you to evaluate what you already have, what you're eating a lot of, what you eat regularly, and things that you really don't need to buy in the future. Now, I love to watch shopping hauls, and I also absolutely love to watch those beautifully organised pantry organisations, people who've got basements with shelves, and I just think, you go, that's great. But when you look at this, you have to remember when you're watching these, that suits that family. So the next thing I want you to do is evaluate the family that you are and the food that you need to eat. I'm really aware as a menopausal woman who's 60 next year that I really need to be hitting my protein goals. My husband is a really busy physical man. He knows he needs to be hitting his protein goals. We both know as people in our late 50s, approaching our 60s, that we really do need to cut back on starches, that we just don't metabolize in the way that we used to, that we need to be really mindful of that we need to be mindful of our gut health and think about the variety of fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts that we eat. We need to be really careful and mindful that no matter how cheap it is or tempting it might be, that for us personally, our choice isn't to eat processed food, and it is to eat natural, real food. But that is us, and you do you. So evaluate the type of family that you are. You know, as a family, have you got people in your family with sensory issues? Have you got people in your family with dietary needs, who can't eat gluten, who can't tolerate lactose, who may be vegan, and so on? We've had these types of chats before, haven't we? So before you go out there and think, I really need to stock up on loads of beans and lentils and pulses, which I have been tempted to do in the past, we need to realise as a couple that those are really inflammatory foods for us, and they really don't do us the world of good. We don't want to be gassy, we don't want to be bloated, and we've done all of those things of soaking the beans and cooking them in different ways. And that we know for us that a animal-based protein diet is what suits us. But this is where I send it back to you for you to reflect on. You need to look at, before you stock up on, is this the right thing for us to be stocking up on? And then we're going to talk about how we achieve that. Little intermission here. Let's talk about food storage. Now, in the time that we've been here, which is 5 years, we came here, we bought a second-hand freezer, then we weren't using it enough, so we got rid of the second-hand freezer because we had a small freezer in the kitchen. And then food prices just went through the roof, and we went out and bought another freezer. Now, this is something I'm going to also hand back to you to consider. This is something you need to weigh up, especially if, like us, you buy fish that's on offer, meat that's on offer, frozen vegetables, frozen fruit to add to your food stockpile, is to consider or weigh up the costs of electricity costs of running your freezer against, do I wait for the offers? For us, we came down and decided it was better for us to pay a little bit more on our electricity bill, not a lot more, running a freezer, may I add, but it is a little bit more on our electricity bill than it was to miss out on all of those really, really good food offers. Now I want to share with you some mistakes that I've made on storing food and sort of the consequences that that had. It's really good here to buy baker's bread from the bakery, of course, the boulangerie here in France, and cut it all up and freeze it. But it takes up way too much room in our freezer, and Mike doesn't eat it fast enough. So no matter how cheap it was or how good it was, it's not something that we're going to do again in the future. And what we need the freezer drawer for is to buy frozen vegetables and put those away, because we can often get very good deals on frozen vegetables. We don't like tinned vegetables. We do keep some in the cupboard for what I really absolutely don't want to cook type meals, and they will do, but they are not our preference. So it's something else for you to consider. Are there things in your freezer that are taking up too much space that you could better use that space for? And bread being one of those examples. Now, let's get into some tips, tricks and strategies for stocking up in and within your budget. Number one, someone shared with me, and I really hadn't thought this one before, but it's a really important one. If you've got a birthday coming up and somebody asks you what you want for your birthday, do not be afraid to say to them, can you get me a supermarket voucher? Or if it's somebody that you know really well, don't be afraid to say to them, can you go and get me, and tell them what you want from the supermarket. You would be surprised how that would really help you. And especially when we were young and we had young children, I would have relished that as a gift. If somebody had given me a supermarket voucher, it would have been helpful beyond words. The next thing we all need to do is talk to our friends about where they are finding the deal. Now, on this very channel, on the Instagram page, somebody told me about a local supermarket that had half price fish on Saturday. Because here in France, it is traditional to eat fish on Friday. So they get lots of fish into the supermarket. And on Saturday, you can go in there and get plenty of fish, half price, and then pop it into the freezer. And it is something I will be very much doing for a few Saturdays in a row to build up the protein supply of fish in my freezer. Find out from people, when does your supermarket reduce the price of meat, if you eat meat, at the end of the day? It's a great thing to stash away and freeze. Find out, when do they do their seasonal sales? When do they do their sales on frozen food? Our supermarket had a fantastic offer on 34% off frozen food. They've got an offer coming up, not that it needs any use to us at all, but it is all things like cookies, biscuits and snacks are coming up 34% off. If you've got children and you send them to school each day with a cookie, that would be a wise thing to buy those, because they keep for months on end. If you have somebody who goes out each day with a packed lunch and they take a small piece of cake with them, that would be a good deal to buy something like that. But looking out for those offers. I know many of you in America tell me about your can sales, your food in cans, and when that is on sale. I'm always looking out for those here too. Some things I always buy in cans. Tinned tomatoes, kidney beans, red beans, haricot beans, the white beans. All of those things, I'm always looking for that when there's 20% off those. So I'm always looking out for those deals. But talk about that with people you know. The next bit of that, you know I share this with you, is to have the supermarket apps on your phone. If they don't send out the flyers anymore, they don't send out the money off vouchers anymore, they are digital. And by having all of these, it means I can go to, and all of my supermarkets are in the same town. I don't have to go driving off in a long way. I know some of you, the advice I'm about to give you two now doesn't suit you, but if it does, it's good advice to never shop in the same supermarket. Some weeks it's Lidl. Lidl has the best offers. I've gone through the app, I've gone through the online catalogue. Some weeks it isn't. Some weeks it might be Carrefour. Some weeks it might be Intermarché. Some weeks for you it might be Kroger. Some weeks it might be Walmart. Some weeks it might be Morrison's. It might be Tesco's. It might be Woolworths, wherever you shop. But having those apps, and find out the days when the offers come out. So first of all, I know they change those online catalogues on Sunday. So I check them every Sunday. And I'm prepared of when I'm going to go shopping. And I know the days when the deals come out. But I also know, because I stock check regularly, because we had that chat at the beginning of the conversation, didn't we, of how much I've got and how much I need. The next bit, I'm going to talk to you about how we build on stock. We went to a supermarket on Saturday and we went for a look round because it used to be called Géant and it's been taken over by the big main supermarket called Carrefour here. And we went for a look round and we didn't need a lot other than coffee and milk, which we picked up. But as we went for a look round, we were really impressed with the reduced food section. And it's one of the reasons that I like to keep some space in the freezer. Not that I bought any of this, but as I was looking through it, there was so much food there that I could, in fact, I hope in my next shop, when I've run down the supplies that we've got, to go back there and go straight back on a Saturday to their reduced food section. And it's this. Eggs here are about $2.95 a dozen, and they were less than half price, so like $1.20 reduced. And what we've done with eggs in the past is I literally crack each one into a large, extra large ice cube tray. I beat it with a fork, we freeze it, and then we pop them out and freeze those. So it's a really good thing to do, is to freeze eggs. Something else that we've done before, and especially useful for cooking, is that I've had gluts of tomatoes, and from the supermarket sometimes there's been a whole box of tomatoes for €1 because they want rid of them. And I've brought them home and I've frozen them. At the time I had no jars left to can them, but I've frozen them, and then I've just been able to take them out, defrost them, and here's the trick if you're going to put them in something like pasta sauce. Stick them the moment they have defrosted into your blender. So freeze them whole, defrost them, then stick them into your blender. Hard cheese freezes really well. Milk freezes. You might have to decant a little bit of the milk out, but milk freezes really well. So those are just some examples. Please leave in the comments below deals that you have found that have been really good, especially in the reduced food section, for example, that you've taken home and frozen. Let's sum this up. It is really vital for all of us to have a very good stock of food, and the stock of food needs to be appropriate to your choices, your budgets and your needs, and your family, and the diet that you eat and what you don't eat is the stuff that you don't buy. Thank you so much for watching. We'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button, and it massively helps the channel if you can leave a comment. We really appreciate that. See you again soon. Bye for now.